We gathered together today as a dear family and friends of Betty Bloomfield. As we mourn her loss, must also celebrate the full, rich life she led. Death has taken our beloved Betty. Friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there's lamentation. In their tears, there's loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For her love that united us in life and which death cannot sever. For her companionship, which we shared along life's path, and which still continues through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of her heart and mind, which brought us joy and happiness, and now become a precious heritage of the Spirit. For all these and more, God, we give you our praise. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai natan v'nai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mevarach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people were well acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us, yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave, and there is strength in faith. With Job we say, Adonai natan, God you have given. You gave us a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in her life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. A poem entitled, My Hereafter. Do not come when I am dead to sit beside a low green mound or bring the first daffodils, because I love them so. For I shall not be there. You cannot find me there. I will look up at you from the eyes of little children. I will bend to meet you in the swaying boughs of bud-thrilled trees and caress you with the passionate sweep of storm-filled winds. I will give you strength in your upward tread of everlasting hills. I will cool your tired body in the flow of the river. I will warm your work-glorified hands with the glow of the winter fire. I will soothe you into forgetfulness to the drop of the rain on the roof. I will speak to you out of the rhymes of the masters, and I will dance with you in the lilt of the violin and make your heart leap with the bursting cadence of the organ. I will flood your soul with the flaming radiance of the sunrise and bring you peace in the tender rose and gold of the after sunset. All these have made me happy. They are a part of me, and I shall become a part of them. Proverbs 31. A woman of valor, who can find? She's more precious than fine pearls. Her husband trusts in her, and so he lacks nothing. She does him good, never harm, all the days of her life. She perceives that her labor is rewarding. Her candle burns on into the night. She reaches out to those in need and extends her hands to the poor. She's clothed in strength and dignity, and she faces the future cheerfully. She speaks with wisdom. The law of kindness is on her lips. Her children rise up and bless her. Her family sings her praises. Many daughters have done valiantly, but you excel them all. Bread and music. Music I heard with you was more than music, and bread I broke with you was more than bread. That I am without you, all is desolate. All that was once so beautiful is dead. Your hands once touched this table and this silver, and I have seen your fingers hold this glass. These things do not remember you, beloved, and yet your touch upon them will not pass. For was in my heart you moved among them, and blessed them with your hands and with your eyes. And in my heart they will remember always. They knew you once, O beautiful and wise. Adonai ro'i lo exar, bin adesha yar bitseni, omei menachot yanachalini. Please join me now in the familiar words, the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters, and restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. I would now like to invite Betty's daughter, Ruthie, to share some personal thoughts about her mother, and then we'll hear from Jessica on behalf of all the grandchildren.
In recent years, if I mentioned to Mom I had attended a funeral or memorial service, she often asked who was in attendance. If Mom is somewhere looking on today, I am confident she is happy to see the family and friends who are with us, and to know that others are watching online from afar. And for that, our family is grateful to each and every one of you. Mom was fortunate to live a long, full life, full of love with our dad, her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Add to that the many friendships she's enjoyed through the years, particularly those of Lil and Marie, friends since before grade school, who I know who would be with us here today if they could. Lil, Marie, and my mom were members of a sorority in high school. And it was not a big sorority, since it had only had 3 members. And you can probably guess who they were. The name of the sorority was Rho Alpha Phi, or Running After Fellas. This sorority is an early example of Mom's sense of humor and her enjoyment of life, which were evident throughout her lifetime. She loved a good joke and relished stories of people she knew or even sometimes didn't know. And when I shared something about someone's life, she often said, "Tell it to me slowly." I have many wonderful memories of Mom laughing at a joke or story until tears streamed down her face and she couldn't speak because she was laughing so hard. And my guess is that many of you have similar memories. While I know Mom touched each of us in different ways, I believe at some point we were all the recipient of her kindness and generosity. She welcomed family and friends into our homes on Scottsdale, Eaton, and Cannon Roads, and fed them the most delicious meals. She did the same while raising us day after day, week after week, and year after year. My husband and 2 sons only wish that skill and desire had been passed down to me. Mom often told me that when she got married, she could barely boil a pot of water. And for all of us who enjoyed her wonderful cooking, that is truly hard to believe. Mom embraced our extended family. She treasured her sisters and brothers by blood and by marriage, especially her lifelong friendship with our beloved Aunt Sue. Mom was adored by her many nieces and nephews as well. She provided support and cared for our grandmother Henrietta, aunts Esther, Bea, Kitty, Norma, and of course her beloved mother Selma. I loved hearing about the many winters she kept her mother company in Palm Springs, enjoying warm sunny days, shopping, eating at great restaurants, and sharing many laughs by the pool. Mom was also generous in ways that few people knew. For example, in her later years, she knitted the sweetest sweaters to give to each of her grandchildren after the birth of their first child. And while she was able to give 3 sweaters, 7 are in safekeeping for the great-grandchildren she will never know. Mom's wisdom and grace were evident as her health declined and she made the decision to move to Stone Gardens. It was a gift for her children that she came to this decision on her own. During this process, she asked her kids and grandkids for wish lists of items that we would like to have from her house. So even as she prepared to leave her wonderful home, she thought of all of us and what we would like to have to remember her and Dad. Mom adapted beautifully to Stone Gardens as she graciously demonstrated how to transition from a beloved home into assisted living. After a short period of adjustment, she thrived in her new surroundings. In fact, I had to plan a good time to call her when she wasn't swimming or watching movies or participating in lectures or going on field trips. And true to mom form, she quickly became a confidant and friend to many of the Stone Garden residents. She engaged a resident in conversation who had hardly ever spoken, sensed when a resident was agitated and brought her needed help, and often quietly helped others when they needed assistance. She was proud of her friendships at Stone Gardens and so appreciative of all the kindnesses shown to her by the staff, as well as her personal team of caregiving angels. Over the last few years, as Mom's health declined and she lost her independence, she once again became a role model as she handled it with strength, grace, and courage. And what amazing gifts to have left all of us. I'll miss so much about my mom, but especially the fun we had gossiping about celebrities, sharing thoughts about a movie or book, shopping at Dillard's or Steinmart, and catching up on life whenever we talked on the phone. These are memories I will hold forever close. However, the most profound memories I have that I will always carry with me are of Mom in my dad's final years. She demonstrated incomparable loving care to our dad as his abilities were diminished both physically and cognitively. She was constant, patient, and willing to meet every need with extraordinary compassion and grace. This was especially admirable given she was in her mid-80s with health issues of her own. But through her actions and her words, Mom taught her children and her grandchildren how to cherish and love one's companion through life's many seasons. I hope with all my heart that Mom is once again with her Tootsie, their souls entwined, wrapped in memories of 67 years together on this earth, and now at peace in eternity. I love you, Mom.
Good morning. I'm Jessica Bloomfield Plato. I'm the second oldest of Betty's 10 grandchildren, and it is such an honor to be here speaking in front of all of you. So I want to share with you what it was like having her as a grandma and the lessons that I'm taking with me. I grew up here in Cleveland, so she was a regular fixture in my life. And Ruthie, we're talking about a lot of the same memories. You know, memories of grandma for me center around the Eaton Road house, which in my mind was synonymous with her. So it was the hub of our family where relatives and friends would come to visit. Big dinners were regular events, and I'd play with my cousins for hours and then count down the months and weeks until we would all be together again in this special place. I'm sure many of you here today spent time at 2988 Eaton Road. And you know it was an amazing place of gathering, of family, of good food and laughter. Grandma was an amazing hostess. When you arrived at dinner, there would be hors d'oeuvres on the table, like the round table in the living room, maybe her onion dip, or a salmon ball, or olives or peppers. Dinner was a home-cooked, sit-down affair, and dessert was always served from the buffet afterwards. The gatherings were large, and I remember that I would always sneak away at some point into the downstairs bathroom, where I would open the medicine cabinet above the toilet and look through her lotions, shea butters, nail polishes in the most vibrant colors. And sometimes there was lipstick too. And I was in awe of my grandma, and these felt like special little glimpses of her that I had all to myself. I have countless memories of sleepovers at her house when my sister Becca and I were little. We'd play McDonald's or Mickey D's, which meant that she and Grandpa would cook us burgers and fries. And mornings would entail toasting rye bread literally at the table. Grandma often took my sisters and me to the pool at Thornton Park when we were little, and we would play and splash around for hours, and then return to her gold Mercedes, I think it was 1965 model, where the black seats and seat belts would be so hot, and she'd cover them with our towels so we could sit before going home. Back to school clothes shopping was an annual event. Grandma took us to Higbee's or the May Company and let us each get 2 outfits. She even let me get the Dijon mustard-colored stretch pants with stirrups that I really wanted one year. As I grew older, and I suppose Grandma did too, our relationship changed and grew with us. She welcomed me with open arms as I sought out more of a connection with her in my early 20s. I knew I had so much to learn from her, such as stories of her life growing up in Toronto with her big sister Aunt Shirley and her mischievous older brother Uncle Harry, or her girlfriends Marie and Lil. She taught me how to knit during the year that I lived at home after college. So on Sundays, I would go to her house, she'd teach me how to knit, and then we'd watch the Browns game together with Grandpa, and we would knit. And Grandma would yell dummies when players fumbled or otherwise screwed up. And since it's the Browns, she spent more time yelling dummies than actually knitting. After I left Cleveland, visits home would always include lunches and movies with Grandma. We would talk and laugh. She never pried, but if I offered up any morsel of info about my love life, she was all ears. Yeah. And when she and Grandpa moved to Bentleyville, she always had us over at the Yellow Door Cafe, just to create more memories and good times. So I've learned so much from Grandma through the years. She could always laugh at herself. She had a habit of mixing up words and phrases and would catch herself most of the time and laugh so hard. Her face would be crunched up and there'd be tears running down her cheeks. And you couldn't help but laugh even if you didn't actually know what the joke was. It was contagious. And sometimes we'd have to wait a few minutes before she could tell us what it was. She always had this amazing ability to look at the bright side of things too, and to think positively about the future. I remember when she had a lot of back pain from spinal stenosis in her later years, she'd always say, "But Jessie, I get relief when I sit down. I don't have pain then. That's okay." Grandma could always embrace and adapt to change so well, such as when Grandpa died, when she moved to Stone Gardens, when she had to stop doing certain activities when her health was declining. So I think back to my final visit with her, which I can't believe was less than 3 weeks ago. And it's such a beautiful and precious last memory I have of this elegant and loving person. And she was happy. It was a wonderful visit. She got to meet and hold my youngest son, her newest great-grandchild, while sharing details of Hannah and Jeff's wedding, lots about the dress and the veil. And when Grandma said goodbye to me and told me she loved me, I saw it in her eyes. She didn't think she was going to see me again. And I was so sure she was wrong, but she knew. The sweet morning visit ended with her giving my 2-year-old a little piece of chocolate that he just treasured and devoured, the parts that weren't all over his face by the end. And that was our time when we got into the car. So now she's embraced the final change, and I'm sure she'd encourage all of us to weather it with grace like she would have. I suppose she'd remind us to focus on how lucky we were to have all the time together that we did, and of the good memories and everything we learned from her. And I'll end with something she herself said to her kitties, her great-grandchildren, when she decided to move to Stone Gardens. She said, "Life is change. We are all faced with change in one form or another during our lifelong journey. How we adapt to it adds to the uniqueness of our being." Thanks, Grandma.
Thank you both for your beautiful words. The Baal Shem Tov, the Hasidic Rebbe, once observed that there are 3 ways to mourn. The first is with tears, the second is with silence, and the third is with song. When we mourn someone truly beloved, we experience all 3. Tears at first, then silence as our grief settles more deeply, and finally song as we're able to celebrate the memories we hold deep in our hearts. So this is a time for tears as we say our final goodbyes to Betty. We'll each remember Betty in our own way. Janice and Steve, Michael and Shelley, Kathy, Ruthie and Bob. You will all remember Betty as your beloved mother. Rachel and Nate, Julia, Miriam and Mark, Jessica and Dennis, Rebecca, Liza and Brian, Nathan, Hannah and Jeff, Gabe and Shelby, Ben and Mara. You'll all remember Betty as your devoted grandmother. And your children, Molly, Isla, Sam, Walker, Barrett, and Evie, will all remember Betty as their adoring great-grandmother. Betty was also a loving sister-in-law to David, Ned, and Sue, and a dear aunt to her many nieces and nephews in Canada, Israel, and the United States. Betty was born on July 7, 1926, near Lodz, Poland, to Louis and Selma Maisel. Betty had 2 older siblings, Shirley and Harry. Her family came on a boat to Toronto when she was 5 years old. Kathy remembers her grandmother telling her that when she took one look at the steerage on that boat and her 3 young children, she thought they were not all going to make it. But they did. Betty's father had very little, but he bought a cart and sold apples. Then he worked as a middleman for a tailor, measuring businessmen for suits at night, and then going to buy cloth during the day and taking it to the tailor to make suits. It was Betty's job to go down to the docks and collect the paper that oranges had been packed in to use for toilet paper. Eventually, her father opened a store and then went to real estate and did very well. Betty was raised in Toronto and attended Harvard Collegiate High School, and then studied at the University of Toronto. She was very well educated. During the summer of 1947, Betty went to work as a counselor at Camp Wabikan in northern Ontario. It was a Jewish camp. And it was there that she met her beloved Richard, who had also come to work from Cleveland. They had the youngest campers. Betty and Richard began dating and planned to go canoeing to High Rock for their days off, but it always rained. It became a standing joke at camp. When Betty lay dying in the hospital, it was the photo of her and Richard as counselors at camp that she asked for. Betty and Richard were married on August 31st, 1948, at a huge wedding in Toronto with 500 guests. Then Betty accompanied Richard back to Pittsburgh to complete his last year of medical school at the University of Pittsburgh, and Betty completed her BA there. Soon they moved to Cleveland for Richard to begin his internship and residency at Babies and Children's Hospital. Betty would go to meet Richard for supper at the hospital whenever he was working. During this time, Betty completed a master's in education at Western Reserve University. Betty and Richard began a family with the birth of Janice in 1950. And then Betty was pregnant with Michael, but Richard had to go into the army during the Korean War. He was stationed in Japan. So Betty went home to stay with her parents in Toronto. Michael was born there. And when Richard returned, their family continued to grow as Kathy and then Ruthie were born. At one point, Betty had 3 children under 3, but it didn't faze her. She was always caring and productive. Betty took wonderful care of her children and other people's children. In her spare time, she volunteered as a big sister at Belfair. Betty kept in touch with her littles for decades, sending birthday presents. Betty was involved in the Park Synagogue Sisterhood, and she was a leader of the Nuclear Freeze campaign in Cleveland. Betty also helped out in Richard's office for years in billing and as a receptionist. She enjoyed interacting with the children when she helped with medical assistant types of jobs. Betty and Richard shared a wonderful 64-year marriage. They enjoyed going camping and went back to Lake Tamagami near where they had met. Betty liked to cook and Richard liked to eat, so they were a perfect pair. As we heard, Betty was a wonderful cook and hosted many family dinners. You could walk into their home on Cannon Road any evening. There'd be a gourmet meal on the table and beautiful classic music playing. They enjoyed volunteering together for Meals on Wheels or going to Chautauqua. They were so supportive of each other through many difficult medical procedures. Nurses would often ask, "How do you do this?" And they would answer, "We're still having fun." Betty treated everyone in her life with kindness and respect. She was committed to helping others. Betty had a wonderful sense of humor and a resiliency. She was brave and had an unsinking positive outlook. Betty was always willing to try new things and laugh at her mistakes. She was always gracious and expressed gratitude to everyone in her life. During the last week, the doctors and nurses who were helping her, she said thank you, even at the very end. And so today may be a time for tears. We are saddened by the loss of Betty, but we learn so much from her, especially how to care for one another. Let these tears serve to strengthen and uphold you as a family. There's a story in our tradition about a rabbi who once passed an old woman planting trees. "Old woman," he called, "why are you planting those trees? You'll never live to see them blossom." But the woman replied, "My ancestors planted trees, not for themselves, but for us, that we might enjoy their shade and their fruit. I too do the same for all those who will come after me." Betty planted an orchard for each one of us, an orchard filled with devotion and with love, and these will always be here for us. We must be grateful that we're able to share in Betty's life. Tomorrow there'll be fewer tears, more silence. As the Baal Shem Tov noted, it will be time pondering, a time for contemplation. Betty will become a greater part of our characters and our beings as we integrate the memories and the values she taught us into our own selves. But finally, there'll come a time for song. The time will come when we can celebrate Betty. We recall all that we learned from her and how she touched each of our lives. May she rest in peace. Zecher Siracha Livracha. May the memory of Betty Bloomfield be a blessing. Amen. Let's pause for a moment of silence as we each remember Betty in our own hearts. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity, and youth to age, from innocence to awareness, and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again. From health to sickness, and back we pray to health again. From offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, and pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage made stage by stage to life everlasting. Amen. I'd now like to invite Betty's son-in-law, Steve, to come forward to chant El Malei Rachamim. If you're able, please rise.
El Malei רחמים שוכן במרומים המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה עם קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים אס נשמס בילבס יהודה לבס עם השדל שהלכה לעולמו בעל הרחמים יסתיריה בספר בכנפיו לעולמים ויצרור ביצור החיים אס נשמסו אדוני הוא נחלתו ושנוח ושלום על משכבו ונאמר Amen.
Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe. Betty Bloomfield, who has entered eternity. God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us all say, Amen. Please be seated for a few moments. This concludes our service here. We'll proceed from here to Mount Olive Cemetery for burial. And following burial, the family will be receiving visitors at Stone Gardens, 27090 Cedar Road in Beechwood. Today, following burial until 3 p.m. and 6 to 8 p.m. Tomorrow, Friday, 2 to 4 p.m. and Sunday through Tuesday, 2 to 4 p.m. and 6 to 8 p.m. Thank you.